Greetings, Gilliam the Rogue here, once again, with an Elder Scrolls Online Let's Talk segment. Today we'll be finishing off all of the weapon skill lines with the final one, the Restoration Staff. This weapon line serves as a potent tool in aiding healers in both PvE and PvP for the meta performance. Since this tree will deal with primarily healing, there will be no damage scaling at all, so it should be noted that the only champion point system nodes that we will be scaling with are Blessed and Elfborn. Everything in this skill line will scale off of max magicka, spell damage, and spell critical. Let's kick things right off with our active abilities. The first being the main quote-unquote spammable of the skill line, Grand Healing. Grand Healing operates as an AoE heal over time, which you press once, it pulls up a reticle, and you heal up to 6 allies within the designated area. I may demonstrate here. It has a quite large radius. As we see, it covers 8 meters, can be casted up to 28 meters away, and it lasts 3 seconds. That's because when you hit an ally with this, it heals them immediately, and then it places a hot on them that lasts 3 seconds, and will heal them once every second over 3 seconds. So if we see here, I'm receiving the healing, and it should also be noticed that there are 4 ticks, 1 for the initial hit, and then 3 for the hot. The other nice thing about Grand Healing is that we can overlap it. If I spam cast it repeatedly, I can get multiple ticks in a row. You see ×2, ×3, etc. So you can stack this skill up to 3 times, because each one will overlay onto its own unique timer. So the first one will always last 3, then the second one will last 3, but thanks to global cooldowns, we can only cast the skill once every second. So we can have a maximum of 3 or ×4, because the third tick will be applied with an initial hit, meaning we'll get a ×4 as our maximum. In and of itself, it is a very potent tool for group healing. However, in 4-mans, it is rather unnecessary, as we don't need to heal as many targets. We can use other skills such as regeneration, which I'll get to, and it should be used primarily as something for dealing with high damage situations if you don't have other better heals in your kit, such as the Templar's Breath of Life or the Sorcerer's Twilight Matriarch. We will begin looking at our morphs, and our first morph is called Illustrious Healing. All this morph does is it adds an additional second to the duration, meaning we can get a maximum of 5 ticks if we spam cast this over and over again. Pretty straightforward. It adds from additional healing, and it allows us to not have to worry about maintaining it as much, as we only have to cast it every 4 seconds instead of every 3 seconds. And then it allows for extra raid healing, especially in trials and whatnot, or in Cyrodiil with groups. We can get a lot of healing off at multiple second intervals by just stacking this over and over again. However, in 4-mans and easier content, you shouldn't be just spamming Illustrious Healing, as overhealing doesn't do anything. We can spend our actions or global cooldowns to much better things. We will look at our other morph, which is Healing Springs, which refunds 230 magicka for each friendly target hit by the initial hit, up to 3 targets, meaning we'll get a maximum of 690 magicka back. Very straightforward, and if we look at our Healing Springs cost, that is quite potent. On top of this, this number will scale up as the ability ranks up, reaching about 274, as well as the fact that this cost we see here on Healing Springs is not mitigated by any passives or cost reduction, as I have no cost reduction on my jewelry, I have no light armor passives, and I have no CP spent. So we can get this much cheaper and actually spam this indefinitely, especially if we're taking the Healing Springs morph, which refunds that magicka. So in terms of meta performance, for 4-mans, you're usually going to want to take Healing Springs, because it's going to help your magicka sustain, it's going to make things easier, and it's going to allow you to move between pack to pack or trash mobs to trash mobs much faster without having to let magicka regen, without holding your group up, and it'll allow for faster, more aggressive content clearing, so getting speed runs, farming dungeons, etc. Healing Springs is going to serve us very, very well in 4-man PvE. Now in 12-man PvE, we have 2 healers in a raid group, and since we have 2 healers, we're going to use 2 different morphs, because the really fantastic thing about this skill is that each morph of these stacks. So if I have 2 people and both of them cast healing springs, I can only have up to 4 healing springs ticks on me, regardless of who's it's casting it on. Because if another player casts healing springs on me and I already have healing springs, it will simply refresh rather than add onto, because it is operating as the same ability. Now, on the other hand, Illustrious Healing is considered a new ability, allowing us to get a ×4 or a ×5 from Illustrious Healing and a ×4 from Healing Springs, allowing for some absurd healing through some disastrous content, especially places like Hard Mode Rakat or the Poison Phase of Serpent, as well as Arcane Vortex from Hard Mode Ethereal Archive on the Mage. Being able to stack these morphs as well as the base morph when necessary or where applicable, you can get some crazy healing that will prevent death aside from one-shots. So using these in tandem will be extremely potent in 12-man PvE or in PvP, where we're going to have multiple healers running together. Now in terms of smaller man PvP or solo PvP, we're probably not going to run Healing Springs, because Healing Springs isn't going to serve us well. We're going to be wanting to be able to heal our allies from a range. We're not going to want to be staying clumped up, because that's going to make us susceptible to being run over. So we're not going to run this skill in small man PvP. In large man, like Zergs or fighting larger groups, we'll definitely be using this skill. You'll always want to coordinate with your other healers which morph they're running so that you can run the other one. The same goes for 12-man trials, and then in 4-man PvE, we're going to run Healing Springs just to help out that Magicka sustain. So, very straightforward, very strong ability in niche application, but do not spam this as your primary heal if you have better heals. And also, don't spam this if everyone's at full health. If everyone's at full health, we don't need to be healing them. We can do other actions, spend our global cooldowns much more efficiently with other skills in the skill line or within our own class line. The next skill we have is called Regeneration, and this applies a heal over time onto an ally that lasts 20 seconds. Every time you cast this, it will hit up to 2 targets of a maximum. Sometimes you, sometimes 2 allies. It will heal quite a large amount of health over the 20 seconds, and it heals in 2-second intervals. So if I cast this here, we can see every 2 seconds I am getting Regeneration. A very straightforward skill, a very helpful one, especially in 4-man dungeons or in smaller man PvP. But in terms of larger groups where we're going to have more than 6 players, we're probably not going to want to run Regeneration, because it's going to be very difficult to keep up on multiple people, since we're going to have to sit there and cast this over and over and over, because it can only hit up to 2 people at a time. So in a 4-man dungeon, that's only 2 casts, but in a 12-man trial, that's 6 casts, or 3 if we're also going to have another healer running. Because the really nice thing about Regeneration in Update 13 is that it will now prioritize people who do not have the heal over time already applied to them. Meaning we're going to have way less casts to worry about, everyone's going to have Regeneration rolling, and it's going to be easier to manage. However, it will still prioritize lower health targets than people who do not have the buff already, so keep that in mind that you still will probably have to cast this a few more times than necessary. If we also notice, it will cost much less than Grand Healing, because it's not going to be a burst heal, it's not going to be reactive. This is a heal over time, and unlike Grand Healing, it's going to be slightly weaker, and it's not going to give as much per second, it's going to give a smaller amount every 2 seconds. So we're going to get 11 heals out of this, because 1 from the initial hit, as we see here, and then we're going to get 10 ticks over the 20 seconds. Very straightforward, very helpful. Can be casted up to 28 meters away, meaning we're going to be able to cover a large distance. The other added benefit of Regeneration is we can simply bar swap off of the one we casted it from. So this really helps us out, as we don't have to worry about stuff. Now, it should be noticed that if we swap to another bar and cast the heal, even if our other bar has more magicka or spell damage, you'll notice that my tooltip is higher on this bar, it's going to refresh the duration rather than increasing the heal. So in order for our heals to be stronger, we're going to have to apply this after it falls off. See, if I cast here, we're going to see regeneration is now hitting harder. So this is kind of an issue, but it's also kind of a boon that we're going to be able to use in different ways. Because if we have things like Major Force running when we cast our regeneration, that means even after we lose Major Force, regeneration is still going to retain the stats that it was initially casted with. So if we drink a potion, we buff up, we receive buffs from our allies, we'll be able to apply regeneration to our group and swap off to a weaker bar where we have more sustain and less burst healing, but still gain the benefit of the burst healing stats. So very, very awesome way in how to use this skill. But now we will look at our morphs, and our first morph is Rapid Regeneration, which simply makes the heal tick faster, but it will also tick shorter. So instead of healing every 2 seconds, it will now heal every 1.5 seconds. So I'll take this morph, and we see it ticks much faster, once every 1.5 seconds. And that's all it does. So it's going to heal a little bit more in a little bit less time, helping it out tremendously in terms of offering healing. It's going to be slightly harder to manage than the other morph, but it's still rather straightforward. Our other morph of regeneration is called Mutagen, which retains the 20-second duration instead of going to the shorter 16.5. It'll still heal once every 2 seconds. It still hit up to 2 nearby allies. Very straightforward. But what happens is if an ally that has mutagen on them falls beneath 20% of their max health, mutagen will be consumed. So regardless of its duration, it could be at 18 seconds out of the 20. It will be consumed and heal for an immediate burst of health and then remove one harmful effect. And let's take this morph and we'll see that it does not increase the amount of harmful effects it removes. So mutagen is kind of nice because when you get low health, it gives a burst heal. But the issue is that it's not rewarded for casting and then like consuming. Like, so if I casted mutagen on a target and 1 second went past and they somehow managed to get nuked to 20% health, I just lost 6 heals for one that's going to be worth roughly 2. Because I'm going to lose 6 heal sources from those 18 seconds, which could have healed more for a very small, mediocre burst. I mean, the burst is nice. It gets them back to about 50% maybe. And obviously, this tooltip is not going to be reflective based on like max CP, gold gear, min-max, good stuff. But still, it's a very small number. And on top of that, removing one harmful effect, I mean, harmful effects are going to be good and or very prevalent in Cyrodiil, but in PvE, not so much. And even if they were in Cyrodiil, that's one harmful effect on top of the C that is probably on top of you. You probably have 6 poisons on you. So mutagen has really fallen to the dogs. It used to be a really good skill because it used to remove up to 4 harmful effects, and the immediate heal was a little bit stronger. Now it's really not in a good spot. I'd like to see something done with it, or maybe what would be really cool is put an internal cooldown on purging. So Templar purges, the skill purge from the Alliance War, and the mutagen purge, but make it rewarding when you successfully purge something. Give it more healing, give a damage boost, make you tankier, something. Give an option to incentivize on smart gameplay elements where you're like, okay, I have a bunch of negative effects on me and I can either wait until they fall off or I can purge them. And instead of being like a Templar or just spamming purge over and over again and being like, whatever, I don't care, negative effects, haha, you're made to think about your actions. Okay, do I suffer Major Defile for 6 seconds and then get tankier, go on the defensive, hold block, pop shields, get ready for damage? Or do I purge that and become immune for the next whatever seconds, like if it's a poison, they have to wait another 9 seconds to apply it because poisons have a 10-second cooldown. So you're making informed choices. You're making choices that reflect a balanced and healthy and competitive gameplay environment that reward players who are quick on their feet, make informed choices, and then go about combat in an intellectual way, not just spamming a button, not just doing the same thing over and over, brain dead, no thought process, but rather the ability of progression, like looking, okay, I need to learn from my mistakes. How do I do that? I look at what I did wrong. Oh, I purged too soon in that fight, and then I got 3 more defiles on me after I purged. So instead of waiting, because I saw those poison injections coming in, or I saw those lethal arrows, or I saw that poison user coming in, I purged too soon, and now I've been punished for it. So it would make you think, okay, next time I go into fight, I'm going to look for those indicators better. And then I'm going to purge at a better time. And then you're going to be granted a combat mechanism. So I would really like to see that sort of gameplay start coming back into Cyrodiil and back into the game as a whole. And, I mean, mutagen isn't really the best option to talk about this because it only removes one harmful effect, and it's only if you get under 20% health. But at the same time, compared to rapid regen, why would I take mutagen? I can just heal someone who's low health rather than relying on this small heal that I have to let them get low health. I want to be able to use ward when they're low health, but if the second they get low health, they're healed, now steadfast ward isn't going to be as strong. So it's damaging thought out gameplay. And you're not rewarded if you remove a harmful effect. Like if they added some sort of reward mechanism on successfully purging things, but also made it so you can't spam do it, then mutagen would be a better choice because you're like, okay, well, if I do get under 20% health and I do have a poison on me or I do have a defile, I'm going to get some sort of buff after purging it. So that's going to be an incentive to take mutagen versus 1. It's going to make informed choices. It's going to make diversity, and it's going to make balance. And it's going to make the game better. So I'd love to see that happen with mutagen and just purges in general, the purify mechanism. Our next ability is called Blessing of Protection, and Blessing of Protection operates as both a heal and a buff. And since there is a heal, it will still scale off of max magicka, spell damage, and spell critical. Pretty straightforward ability. It lasts 8 seconds, but its heal hits immediately upon casting, as we see here. I cast it, and anyone standing in this glowy rectangle will receive a buff and a heal up to 6 allied players. Remember, the same is about Grand Healing, and the same is about Blessing of Protection. If we are dealing with an AoE heal, it will only hit up to 6 players. So you have to keep that in mind, that if you're in a trial or if you're in PvP and there's more than 6 players, we're going to have to cast these skills more than once, because we're going to have to, like, especially in a trial, you need to cast twice to make sure everyone gets the benefit. Or if you have another healer, then you only need to cast it once if you're both applying Blessing of Protection at the same time. A rather straightforward skill. It heals for quite a bit up front, more than a Grand Healing, roughly 3 times the size, a little bit less. It costs a little bit more magicka, and it's not going to have a heal over time component, so we're not going to be able to just let this run on them. But we're also going to grant our allies minor resolve and ward, increasing their resistances by 1320 for 8 seconds. Now 1320 in terms of damage mitigation is 2% damage mitigation, as we simply take the 1320 divided by 660 to get the 2%. So 2% damage mitigation across the board for 8 seconds, an upfront heal. So pretty straightforward. In and of itself, not doing too hot as an ability, but we have some morphs to increase that power. Our first morph is called Blessing of Restoration, which increases the size, the healing done, and the duration to 15 seconds. So as we saw here, the area that it covered was 20 meters out and 8 meters to our sides, meaning it was a rectangle. Pretty sizable, pretty easy to hit multiple players in, and then Blessing of Restoration takes this to 20 by 10, so 2 meters to the side instead of 8. Pretty straightforward, almost doubles the duration of giving that minor resolve in ward, and that's about it. So we notice that the healing is almost 1,000 more. Kind of nice, but in most applications, that's going to be overhealing. It's not going to be something we necessarily need. So the issue with Blessing of Restoration is that Minor Resolve and Ward are the thing that last 15 seconds. And for the most part, we're going to need to be healing definitely more than once every 15 seconds. So not having a heal over time component of Blessing of Restoration is really going to be its downfall, since a mediocre heal up front and then a 2% damage mitigation for 15 seconds isn't going to really bring anything unique or efficient to the table, because Minor Resolve and Ward aren't going to do too much in deciding whether our allies or even ourselves live or die. I mean, it'll definitely help, but it's not going to be mandatory. And that little heal isn't going to bring much to us when we can do things elsewhere, like stack healing springs or make sure rapid regeneration is ticking. However, our other morph is called Combat Prayer, and what Combat Prayer does is it retains the same duration, the same area, etc., but instead of only applying Minor Resolve and Ward, we also grant our allies Minor Berserk, increasing their damage done by 8% for the 8-second duration. Now, Combat Prayer is one of the most potent skills in our kit as a healer. Not as a heal, but as a utility ability that allows our allies to deal more damage, meaning, in the long run, we're going to have to do less healing because the boss and the mobs that we're fighting are going to die sooner. So, in a way, it is a heal, because it saves us from doing what we need to do, keeping our allies alive. Because if the objective of combat is met, killing our enemy, there's nothing to heal, and we can continue, go to the next pack. And it's also going to be very, very important for min-max groups. Now, should you always run Combat Prayer in every single group? Not necessarily. If you're in a group with Nightblades, they're going to have access to Minor Berserk on their own, so they're not going to need this skill. So you have to be aware, what is my group composition? What are we doing? Are we going to be split up a lot, or are we going to be close that I can constantly be applying this? If I have Nightblades in the group, I don't have to worry about Combat Prayer. If I don't have Nightblades, then Combat Prayer is going to be very important. So keep things in mind with when and where to use these skills. You have to be aware of your group composition. That's your duty as a healer. Understand your surroundings, both the enemies and your allies. So Combat Prayer going to be extremely meta for both PvE and in PvP, because it's going to give us that nice little heal so we can spam cast this instead about other stuff. It's not going to be a burst reactive heal, but it'll still tide off a little bit of damage. Like if an ally drops to 60%, you can just hit him with a Combat Prayer instead of worrying about having to throw out a Breath of Life or spamming healing springs, because it's going to be enough to tide them into a safe spot again. But if they're dipping to 30% or 40%, then you're probably going to want to go to direct healing and not buffing them. But still, Combat Prayer should be your primary focus to keep up 100% of the time if you're looking for efficiency and being that badass healer. Healing is more than keeping your allies alive. It's making them stronger and keeping them alive. So Combat Prayer is going to do a lot of that in a very efficient way. Our next skill is called Steadfast Ward, which costs a heaping almost 5k magicka with no cost reductions, but still very straightforward, not really meant to be spam casted, because it's going to get stronger when we cast this on lower health targets. Now, it should be noted that Steadfast Ward is one of the only shields in this game to scale with more than max magic or health. Steadfast Ward will scale with max magic and spell damage. No other shield in the game boasts the ability to scale with spell damage, allowing Steadfast Ward to be much stronger than it appears. The tooltip is rather low, but that's because it also increases in size based on how much missing health we have. So if we cast this on a target at 10% health, they're going to get crazy big shields. So we get up to a 300% increase, meaning a 3 times multiplier. So that tooltip immediately goes from 3,500 to over 10k. meaning we're going to have a very big shield when our allies need low health. And that's the only time we should be using Steadfast Ward, is when someone is underneath 50% health, because the size of that shield is not only going to make them be able to survive, it's going to add on some artificial health. So you don't necessarily have to go right back into healing, or if you do, they're going to have a 6-second window where they can take additional punishment over what their maximum health is. So if I let an ally get to 10k health when he has 20k, I apply a ward. Ward is going to go on for like 7k, and then I heal him back to 20k. Now he has an effective 27,000 HP, meaning he's going to be able to take way more damage in that 6-second window than he'd normally be able to, allowing for Steadfast Ward to be very strong in both PvE and PvP for smaller group application, because this is only going to hit one person, and it's going to go to the person with the lowest health. So you have to keep that in mind, that Steadfast Ward is only going to go to people at low health, and it's not going to be an AoE. So you're only going to want to do this when like 1 or 2 people are low health, or if you're in solo performance like Maelstrom Arena or in PvP, then you can use Steadfast Ward. Now we will look at our morphs, and our first morph is called Ward Ally, and all this does is, instead of only warding one person, it will always ward one person and yourself, so you will always get this shield. Now keep in mind that it will not get, the shield that you grant yourself will not scale based on who you throw it on. So if I cast this on a 10% target and I'm at 100% health, I'm not going to get that 300% bigger shield because my ally did. It's going to still look at what percent I'm at. So this is best to use if you're in like small man PvP and you're with a buddy or a couple people. Then Ward Ally is going to give a lot of shields to you and your allies, because you're going to be constantly taking pressure as a healer in Cyrodiil. So always having a shield and shielding your allies is going to be a very nice way to alleviate pressure in a multitude of ways. In terms of PvE, it's not going to do too much, because we're not going to be taking too much damage as a healer if our tanks and our DPS are doing our job, making sure we're safe and we are avoiding combat. So in PvP, for smaller groups, Ward Ally, going to be nice. In larger groups, not going to be so good, because we're going to want to be healing a lot of players, not one. And then in PvE, not going to be good really anywhere, because in dungeons, we don't need to worry about it. In solo, we don't need to worry about shielding another ally. So this morph isn't going to do much for us unless we're doing small man PvP. Our other morph, on the other hand, is called Healing Ward, which adds an initial heal upon casting, and on top of that, if the shield expires, so if there is any duration, if the 6-second duration goes off and the shield is still on you, it will be consumed based on how much remaining shield is left. So 100% of the ward's remaining strength. That means whatever shield is left after the 6 seconds will be converted into a heal. 1 point to 1 point. So if there's 1,000 shield left, then you'll be healed for 1,000. Now the nice thing about Healing Ward is, since it is a shield, it will increase its size based on CP allocation in the Bastion node, allowing it not only to give a larger shield, but it will also convert into a larger heal, because there will be more shield remaining after the duration if it lasts. On top of this, since it goes from a shield into a heal, that means our percent healing amplifications will apply to whatever is left of the shield, allowing it to be stronger. So if I have 1,000 damage shield left and Healing Ward ticks off, but I have a 20% bonus to healing, instead of only healing for 1,000, it's going to heal for 1,200, because my amplifications are applying to the healing done. And furthermore, this heal will be able to crit. So we immediately get another 50% bonus shield or heal size based on whatever shield was left if this crits, and then this can be increased further with points into Elfborn, with Major Minor Force, and with gear sets or the Mundus Stone, the Shadow. Now, is that going to be optimal? Not so much, but it's going to allow for a lot of healing from this simple ability, allowing it to do more than just one thing, which is allow people to take more damage. It's going to allow them to take damage and it's going to heal them. So in solo performance and when you're healing in PvE for like 4-mans and stuff, Healing Ward is going to be a fantastic tool because the fact that it prioritizes low health targets means it's going to prioritize being efficient. It's going to be a bigger shield, which if that shield lasts, it's going to be a bigger heal. So you're not going to have to worry about throwing off breaths. You can just use a Healing Ward and then go back to applying rapid regeneration or giving combat prayer or doing healing springs instead of having to spend massive amounts of magicka spamming ward over and over again, because it's going to do more than one. So a very strong tool in solo performance in PvE and in PvP, as well as smaller groups in PvE. Now remember, in PvP with smaller groups, we're going to want to take Ward Ally because we're going to be taking a lot of damage as a healer as well as our allies. So that's going to be a little bit more efficient there, but still Healing Ward can be used there as well. But in terms of larger groups, we're not going to want to really use this skill because it's low cap of 1 person per second because of global cooldowns. We're not going to be able to encompass a large part of our allies, so we're not going to want to run this skill. Our last ability is the buff ability from the Restoration staff line, which is Force Siphon. It has a hefty 1.5 second cast time. It is casted at a single target application, meaning you have to cast this more than once if you want to apply it on multiple enemies, and it costs a minor amount of magicka. It lasts 20 seconds and can be casted up to 28 meters away. Now, just because there's a heal on this doesn't mean it will scale, and that's because it applies minor lifesteal, which is a buff where anytime you or an ally does damage to the target that has minor lifesteal applied to them, they will be healed for 600. Now, this will not be considered your healing, so your healing percent amplifications such as Elfborn or Blessed will not amplify them. Instead, it will operate as its own entity, so it will heal for a flat 600. It should be noted that the minor lifesteal proc from Force Siphon can crit, so that's going to mean that 600 is going to be able to be amplified by your crit hit multiplier or crit hit damage. They are the same thing, which is a base of 50%. So 600 is going to get an additional 50%, meaning a 900. And then other percent amplifications will be able to apply to it if they are healing received. This will not scale off of our casted stats. So if you have 1 billion max magicka or 1 billion spell damage, doesn't matter. Minor lifesteal still going to be 600. If you have 3,000% increased healing done, doesn't matter. Lifesteal is going to operate as its own entity. So the only way to get this up is if you crit with proccing minor lifesteal, which means it'll look at each and every individual who is proccing it, crit hit damage, as well as their percent healing received. So things like Quick Recovery or Quick to Mend or the Argonian passives, things that deal with percent healing received, that will increase the amount of healing done to their allies when they proc it. And the major issue with this that it stands right now is that minor lifesteal has an ICD of 1 second regardless of how many targets you're hitting it with. So if you apply minor lifesteal to 20 targets and your ally walks in and does a steel tornado, instead of being healed 620 times, he's going to be healed for 600 once, every second. So the importance of applying minor lifesteal to multiple targets isn't going to be there because there's a cap on it. And on top of this, 600 health every 1 second isn't going to save you in combat. It's not going to do anything for us. It's most of the time it'll be overhealing that's wasted, or it's going to be so mediocre and insignificant in whether someone lives or not that it's not going to be worth running. So right now, on going into update 13, Force Siphon is going to be in a really bad spot because minor lifesteal is a very weak debuff in and of itself at the moment. Now, if they made this so every target you applied lifesteal to had a 1 second ICD of proccing, so if I put this on 3 targets, I ran in and hit them and then got 1,800 health back instead of 600, that would be awesome. It would incentivize using minor lifesteal in multiple group applications. It would incentivize using one of the morphs that we'll look at, and it'll be a stronger way to get healing, something that makes a difference in combat. But if we just put it on one target, it's not going to do anything important. But now we will look at our morphs, and our first morph is called Siphon Spirit. So instead of only applying Minor Lifesteal for the 20 seconds, it will also apply Minor Magicka Steal for the 20 seconds. Meaning that anytime you hit the enemy with damage, you or your allies, they will be granted 400 Magicka. This operates the same exact way that Lifesteal does, in the sense that it has a ICD of 1 second at all. So if you put this on a bunch of targets, no matter how many damage sources you have, you will only get 400 Magicka back every second. I really, really dislike this. So not only does Siphon Spirit in and of itself not do much from Minor Lifesteal, really insignificant, but Minor Magicka Steal is also not going to be that strong. It's going to be very important to run in coordinated groups, but remember, Siphon Spirit has a 1.5 second cast time. Look at how obnoxious this animation is, where I am locked into doing nothing but applying this skill. "1.5 seconds of just sitting here wasting time that I could be healing or buffing my allies. I don't understand why this exists in its current state. Minor Lifesteal, or even Force Siphon with Minor Lifesteal and Magicka Steal, 1.5 seconds to apply a 20-second buff. That means I'm already operating at an 18.5 second buff in terms of how often I can gain efficiency for it. So I'm losing time that I could be healing or buffing with other skills. There are other skills that apply Minor Lifesteal and Magicka Steal, really nullifying the existence of Siphon Spirit and Force Siphon in and of itself. So Siphon Spirit in a really bad spot right now, really not liking it in terms of efficiency. Like, Elemental Drain is more efficient. It won't have the Lifesteal, but it'll have Breach. And Magicka Steal, it'll be the same duration, same target cap, but no cast time. So, like, why would I run Siphon Spirit? And then Radiant Aura nullifies both of them on the Templar, applying Minor Magicka Steal to all targets in a 28 meters radius. A radius, like a circle, not a range, not how far away I can cast it on one target, but any target 28 meters within the Templar's Radiant Aura, compared to Siphon Spirit or Elemental Drain. I mean, these changes really hurt Ele Drain and Siphon Spirit, and I'd like to see something else done with them, because as it stands, they will never be used again. Our other morph is called Quick Siphon, which removes the cast time. So instead of having that awful clunky 1.5 second windup, it immediately goes off. So I'll demonstrate here. Instead of having that obnoxious cast time that I demonstrated before, it just goes off instantly. And it can be block canceled, meaning it'll go off faster. So if we notice, if I cast this here, it's going to take like 1 whole second to go off, but if we do this in block cast, it's going to be instant. So you can use that. However, still, Quick Siphon, its morphs, its base ability is going to be just complete garbage. Like, to be frank, going into 1 Tamriel, or going into Update 13, Siphon and its morphs are literally gutter trash. No reason to use them ever. And I'm really disappointed, because Siphon was in a decent spot. It was hard to manage because of that awful cast time, but it gave 1% of your Magicka back every time you dealt damage. It had a 1 second cooldown, but it gave more than Minor Magicka Steal if you had a higher Magicka pool. And it healed way more. And it healed more for the caster. It just did more, and it was unique, and it stacked with things like Ele Drain, meaning it was still valuable, it was still efficient. Now it's just some awful gimmicky thing that applies the same buff, but way less efficiently. I just don't get it. But now we will look at our ultimate ability, and that is Panacea. And Panacea costs a meager 100 ultimate, and it lasts 5 seconds. So what we do is we whirl up our staff in the air and we twirl it around, and every second over the 5 seconds we're going to heal an ally, and it's going to be a pretty potent heal. Look at the size of that heal. So I am a Templar. We'll look at my Breath of Life. My Breath of Life, unbuffed with no passives or anything, is 5406. Now, what was my Panacea? 5090. So almost as strong as a Breath of Life every second for 5 seconds. Meaning I'm going to be able to heal up to 5 people if necessary, or the same person multiple times if they're taking that much damage for a Breath of Life almost every cast. So this is going to be very strong in terms of the amount of raw healing we can throw out. And the low ultimate cost is going to make it really easy. On top of this, while not advisable, since it is an ultimate, it will scale with our stats, regardless of magicka or stamina. So if we're a stamina build, this will scale with stamina and weapon damage. Now, am I telling you to use a restoration staff as a stamina build? Hell no. Please don't do that. But you can still do it if you want to. But efficiently, please God, no. Still, it's going to be a very strong ability for healers to use if they're running out of magicka or they need to just heal so much damage, especially in Cyrodiil. So in PvP, Panacea is going to be really strong, especially when we look at our morphs. But in PvE, we're going to not be taking that much damage most of the time, and we're going to be wanting to heal 12 targets, not just 5. So this ultimate isn't really going to be used in PvE at the moment. There might be a few ways to utilize it, which are being investigated with one of the morphs, but we'll see what happens. Now we will look at our morphs, and our first morph is called Life Giver. And what Life Giver does is when you activate this ultimate, you immediately cast Regeneration, Blessing of Protection, and Steadfast Ward all at once with no cost. So it casts all of these skills, the rapid regen, so that means 2 people are going to get a heal over time, and it will look at the morph you have. So if you have rapid, it'll apply rapids. Then it'll apply Blessing of Protection, which if you have Combat Prayer, it will apply Combat Prayer. And then it'll also give Ward, and if you have Ward, then it'll grant whichever morph you have. So I'm just going to demonstrate here that Life Giver does give the morphed version of these skills, not just the base, kind of increasing its efficiency, and it's also going to cast an additional thing that isn't listed there, which is Grant Healing or its morphs. It's also going to cast that. So it's going to cast every ability in here other than Quick Siphon when we activate this. So let's pop Life Giver. We see Grand Healing, Rapid Regeneration, Combat Prayer, and Healing Ward. So it took all of my morphs and it did everything. The only thing it did not do was apply Quick Siphon because it requires an allied target, not an enemy, because Quick Siphon is enemy target and all of these are allied. So that's really cool about Life Giver, that it takes your morphs and it also casts Grand Healing, which isn't listed on there. Still, I would kind of like if Life Giver increased the duration to 10 seconds, reduced the amount of burst healing it had, but then also casted these skills once every 2 seconds or maybe once every 5 seconds, so we got 2 of them off. I think in terms of comparison between Life Giver and the other morph, there would be like a really hard choice. Like, okay, well, what do I want to do? Do I want to be throwing off 4 global cooldowns in one thing and giving minor berserk for 8 seconds and a shield and healing 2 people and giving a nice burst heal? Or do I want to give major force and protection to 5 people for 5 seconds? So you'd be gifted, or you'd be stuck between 2 hard choices. Like, one would be better for a certain application. So I'd kind of like to see something get done to Life Giver to make it just a little bit more enticing, a little more juicy to make you want to take that. Because as it stands, the other morph is definitely optimal if you're ever going to be using this ultimate. But our other morph is called Light's Champion. And on top of doing the juicy heals, almost the Breath of Life every 1 second for 5 seconds, we're also going to make it so anytime this ability heals an ally, it will grant them major force and major protection for 5 seconds, increasing their critical hit damage by 15% and reducing their damage taken by a whopping 30%. This is the morph I was talking about in PvP being strong and being maybe applicable to PvE. So the only other source of major force in the game right now is aggressive Warhorn, which applies to all targets in a nearby area, but it only lasts 9.5 seconds. This lasts 5 seconds, but Warhorn costs 250 ultimate compared to Light's Champion 100, meaning in terms of effectiveness, we're going to be able to get off 2 of these for every 1 Warhorn, and more if we're casting this immediately when we get 100 ultimate. Meaning we're going to have a 10-second duration, plus if combat's going along enough to get another 100, that's going to be 15 seconds versus the 9.5. So that's going to be really strong to give major force. Now, the issues with this is it has a maximum cap of who it can apply to of 5 players. Warhorn has no cap at the moment. It's anyone within a range that's an ally. So that's going to be really efficient versus Light's Champion's 5. So in terms of PvE DPS where you want to have major force, it's kind of hard to make the decision. But if you have 2 healers running Light's Champion, if the ability is going to people who need it and prioritizing people who don't have major force and protection already, then we have a viable means of giving major force and protection. Because a big issue in PvE and endgame right now is stacking mechanics and zero counterplay mechanics such as multiple void spheres one-shotting people. But if you had a whopping 30% damage reduction in a form that was also giving you a massive buff in offensive gains, you might be able to survive that. So this is being investigated in endgame PvE. I'm not sure how it'll do. I have my doubts, especially compared to aggressive Warhorn, which is not only major force for 9.5 seconds to all targets in the area, but it's also 10% max health, Maj, and Stam. So it's going to be really strong, and I'm not sure, but we'll see what happens. I'll get back to you. But in PvP, this morph is crazy in Small Man. I've seen groups of 3 to 4 people wipe out groups of 20 because Light's Champion running from their healer in that group of 5 is healing for Breath of Life every 1 second for 5 seconds and making everyone tanky as a mother. It's crazy. 30% damage mitigation for 5 seconds in Cyrodiil? That's crazy if you know how to use it. And you're making sure your crits are dealing more damage. That's effectively removing the impenetrable trait by 15%. 1500 impen out the window in the form of major force for 5 seconds. That's a pretty damn strong ability. And it's giving the healing as well at a meager 100 ultimate. Meaning if you're constantly killing players too, you're getting ultimate like crazy because of that Battle Frenzy passive. 20 ultimate every kill, that's 5 people dead and you have one of these back. So very, very strong in PvP, and it has hopes in PvE. So we'll see where it goes. Now we will look at our passive abilities. And our first passive is called Essence Drain, which all we do is we gain Major Mending for 3 seconds at rank 2 after completing a fully charged heavy attack. And Major Mending gives 25% healing done, and it cannot be stacked with other Major Mending. So if we're a Templar and we have Major Mending from our Sacred Ground passive where we cast Cleansing Ritual, we're not going to need to make use of Essence Drain. And that's going to be really nice because Essence Drain for the Major Mending for 3 seconds sucks so much. Look at how long it takes to get a fully charged heavy attack off. 2 whole seconds to get off a heavy attack, which while it does do damage, although not much, it'll also give 5% of our magicka back, which can be amplified by a passive, but we're not going to be able to heal during this time. So the only time I can really heavy attack is if I have my hots rolling and then I'm heavy attacking. But still, I could have casted 2 combat prayers in that time instead. I could have given my whole raid Minor Berserk instead. But instead, I wasted 2 seconds to gain Major Mending for 3 seconds, which means after 5 seconds of starting my heavy attack, I have to heavy attack again. So I really don't understand why Major Mending lasts so short for how much of a loss a heavy attack is. Like, for as much as ZeniMax loves heavy attacks and really wants them to be a viable and fun gameplay element, they're not rewarding, especially not Essence Drain. Major Mending needs to last at least 12 seconds. You need to at least gain something big where you're going to have a time window to make utilization of Major Mending after sacrificing 2 whole seconds. Now the other portion of Essence Drain is you heal yourself or a nearby ally for 30% of the damage inflicted of the final hit of the heavy attack. So the issue with this is that it's not each tick, it's only the final one. And if we notice here, you have to be 5 meters by the target, not from yourself. So if I cast this back here, I'm not being healed by Essence Drain. I have to be 5 meters or closer to the skeleton or my target to be able to get this minor, measly little hit. Look at 300 health. That's weaker than minor lifesteal. That's trash. This passive, as it stands, is complete garbage. Something needs to be done. And the sad thing is this is our first one. This isn't going to be the only bad passive we have. The Restoration staff line has great abilities, but some of these passives are really bad, and I'd love to see some stuff done with them. So Major Mending needs to go up to at least 10. I'd love to see 12, maybe even more, 15, 20 seconds, because a 2-second sacrifice just to get Major Mending, which you need to be efficient, is going to be massive, and 3 seconds is not a justification. On top of that, 30% of the damage done as a heal within 5 meters of the target, that might as well not even be there. You can remove that if you're going to increase Major Mending, because what is that going to do? A 300 heal? If I was in all gold gear and had CP, it might be, what, 1,000? What is that going to do? 1,000 heal every 2 seconds? That's useless. I'm better off casting Rapid Regen naked. Our next passive is called Restoration Expert, which increases our healing done by 8 and 15% at rank 2 on allies under 30%. So the nice thing about this is it's going to apply to all of our healing. It's not going to just be Restoration staves. You have to have one equipped, but any heal you do, if a target is under 30% health, our heals will be 15% stronger, allowing them to get back to full faster, much more efficiently, less casts, less wasted global cooldowns, more time sustaining our magicka, buffing our allies, etc. So, Restoration Expert, one of the few Restoration staff passives that are actually decent. Now, is it OP? Is it amazing? Not really, but it's still going to help. It's going to give us some extra healing. Means our Breath of Life or Twilight Matriarch, our healing award, is going to be really strong when an ally is low health. So that's going to definitely help, but it's not going to be like crazy, crazy strong. Our next passive is called Cycle of Life, which increases the amount of magicka we get back after completing a heavy attack by 15 and 30% at rank 2. So the baseline is 5% of your magicka or stamina back when you complete a heavy attack. And right now, the only ways to increase those are Cycle of Life, which will be an additional 30% of the 5%. Heavy Armor, which will also come in the form of Rapid Mending. So magicka or stamina, your heavy attacks return up to 25%. These will be multiplicative of the 50% and then add together separately. And then there's another one in the Lover called Tenacity, which increases the amount of healing or the amount of magicka or stamina we can get back by up to 16% with 100 points spent. So those are going to be ways to get more effective heavy attacks resource management, which will definitely help. But remember, that heavy attack is a 2-second sacrifice, that time window. So the nice thing about Cycle of Life is if we're running out of magicka, we're going to have the ability to get some back. Now, that's going to be kind of helpful, especially for newer players who don't have maximum CP, who don't have gold enchants, who aren't running optimal builds. It's going to help them have to heavy attack less, which means they're going to be able to heal more, they're going to be able to buff their allies more. But as a healer, your job, on top of buffing your allies, keeping yourself and your allies alive, is to make sure you don't run out of magicka, because if you run out of magicka, then you can't do those. It's as good as you being dead for a window of time where you can't heal. So Cycle of Life isn't doing anything for the efficient healer, because in a raid or in a PvP group, as long as there are no poisons being applied to you, you're not going to run out of magicka unless you're copiously spamming Breath of Life for some absurdly high cost ability, and you're not going to want to do that. We're going to have other ways to get magicka back. Remember, the other morph, the Healing Springs, going to give magicka back. We can use a Maelstrom Staff with rapid regen, which gives us magicka back whenever we crit with it. So our goal as a healer, not only to heal, make sure no one's dying and buffing our allies, but also to make sure we're always at enough magicka so we can continue doing so. And Cycle of Life doesn't help prevent that. It only helps alleviate it when it comes. So I would really like to see Cycle of Life be converted into something that helps us in the longevity part of combat, rather than just at this one everything's going black, we need magicka back moment. Like, instead of like this last stand where you need some magicka back to breath once or twice more, it should be applying all the way through combat so that doesn't happen, or it happens less frequently, or only if you're participating incorrectly in combat, so spamming those big heals with no reason. So Cycle of Life isn't a useless passive, but it's definitely a weak one, and I'd like to see something done with it. Our next passive is called Absorb, which increases our magicka or restores our magicka by a flat amount every time we block a spell, and at rank 2 it's about 500 or so. This doesn't scale with anything, like if I drink a potion that has major sorcery, that isn't going to go up. It's not going to change with my magicka, so it's going to be a flat amount. And it's every time we block a spell, which will be nice in PvP, because that's going to happen a lot. But usually we're going to be blocking with the sword and board so we can permablock or block longer. So we need to have a restoration staff out, and that's only in PvP. How many times do you block a spell in PvE? Hard mode Rakat, you might block some void spheres, and that's about it. But again, we have another instance where this passive is here, where it's a very niche bonus. Like, you only are able to make utilization out of it in very small applications, very small parts of the game. And on top of that, what is 540 magicka gonna do? Look at our Maelstrom Staff. 480 magicka back every 4 seconds when we crit with regen, versus whenever we block a spell, what's going to happen more? Critting with regen, who's on all of the players that I'm casting it on, which can be up to 12, or 540 magicka back when I block a spell, whenever that may happen. So Absorb, another instance of a really weak and bad passive. If anything, Absorb should make it when an ally takes damage that has a shield on them from you, you get magicka back. That would make sense. That would make utilization of the skill Absorb. What are you doing? Absorbing damage. So blocking any damage maybe gives magicka back. Blocking damage with a shield on you or your allies gives magicka back. That would be helpful. That would incentivize gameplay where a healer is taking damage or a healer is applying more shields. That would help the Dragon Knight healer as well, because instead of big healing on the Dragon Knight, their source is Igneous Shields. So if they were spamming Igneous Shields within a weapon or with a Restoration Staff, that'd be a great way to get magicka back. That would help them a lot. And it would be more applicable to the game's combat in both PvE and in PvP, rather than just some ultra niche part of the game that gives almost no reward back when you can make use out of it. So another really bad passive that needs some heavy work. Our last passive is called Restoration Master, which increases the healing done with our Restoration Staff spells, so our abilities and passives, by 3% and 6% and 5% at rank 2. So the issue with this, it only applies to Restoration Staff abilities. The nice thing about this, it has no other requirement. They don't have to be low health. You don't have to be blocking a stupid spell. It's all the time. So it's a 5% more efficiency out of all of our heals, other than Quick Siphon, in the skill line. So that's going to help. It's going to apply to the tooltip, so we'll see it directly. It's going to be very straightforward, but is it going to do a lot? Not really. I mean, I'm a master of restoration. Why is 5% healing done my benefit? That doesn't make me feel like I'm a master of healing my allies. There's no cool dynamic gameplay. There's no interesting mechanic. I just get 5% healing with a resto staff. Very disappointing passive. I mean, is it awful? No, but the final passive of a line should be cool, like rewarded for all of my resources as a destruction staff master. I'm killing enemies so I can get back in combat. Oh, I'm getting movement speed for hasty retreat. Like, I'm being granted a mechanic. There's additional gameplay elements within the skill line because of this passive. I'm able to make use out of them. Dual wield, twin blade, and blunt. I'm gifted benefits based on what weapon I'm using. One hand and shield. I can move around in combat. I'm gifted the ability to manipulate mechanics. I can do things extra that I couldn't have done before. I'm granted unique gameplay. Restoration Staff Master, 5% healing, not unique. Boring, lame, get it out of here. Please. Make something cool out of this. Make the Restoration Staff passives great again. I remember when this game first came out, Cycle of Life was the most busted, amazing passive ever. 1% damage done for every 10% of current health you have. DPS builds used to run Resto Staves because they were so fucking good. That's how awesome Resto Staves were. Now look at where we are now. 1, 2, 3, 4 really underwhelming passives. We have 4 amazing skills used in the meta in both PvE and PvP. We have 1 bad skill. Alright, I can live with that. 1 junker skill per skill line, that's copable. I can deal with that. But when we have 4 amazing skills, an ultimate that is on the brink of being OP in some application but really weak in others, like, that's balanced gameplay when you have something that's applicable to some application. Now, I still think that the ultimate could do more work. I don't think it's perfect. I'd like to see something else with it. But all of these abilities, they have uses, and they have the player making informed choices. Combat prayer. Okay, do I need to heal my ally, or should I be buffing them? Can I use that small heal to ignore Breath of Life? Oh, my allies are low health. Do I need to get Breath of Life, or can I give them a big shield, and if they're rewarded and continue to not take damage, then they'll get healed on their own. Rapid regeneration, a really easy to use heal that allows me to perform other actions because I'm healing without actively having to do some, a heal over time. And then a big AoE heal for when you actually need to clump up or move from point A to point B as a group. You have dynamic gameplay. Quick Siphon, meh, okay, 1 ability, I can deal with it. Essence Drain, not dynamic. Restoration Expert is okay because you're rewarded for healing low health allies. Cycle of Life only rewards you if you're getting to a point where you shouldn't be anyways. Absorb, hardly usable in the game in its current state, and even if you find the way to make use out of it, your reward is a measly 540 magicka. And then being dubbed a Master of Restoration gives you 5% flat healing with Resto Staves. Yeah. Make Restos great again. But that is it for the Restoration Staff skill line. As we saw, we have a bunch of good skills in our book. We have a decent ultimate, but our passives are really in a rough spot right now. I'd love to see some stuff done with them. I'd really like to see the healer weapon, the only weapon we can really use as an effective healer, not necessarily damage dealer. I'd like to see it be rewarded more to the user and make them feel more impactful rather than just some boring hollow shell that gives 5% amplifications for being a quote-unquote master. I'd love to see some dynamic gameplay in here that rewarded informed choices and made good healers stand out, but also giving the option for learning so that you looked at these skills and you're like, okay, what are cool ways that I can use these instead of having to heavy attack every 5 seconds. Like, there's no learning. There's no interesting gameplay. So, a lot of work to be done with the Restoration Staff passives, but the abilities are in a really good spot. Some of them could use some work. The ultimate, maybe. Some balancing in there. But overall, great skills. It's just the passives are really lackluster. Make the user of the Restoration Staff feel important. Make them feel empowered. Make me feel like a Restoration Master, not just some punk with a staff. But anyways, thank you guys so much for watching. If I have misspoken at all, please drop a comment below. I will remedy that with a annotation where applicable. Otherwise, I hope you guys have learned something, whether how small or big it is. Rally to the cause of making restoration staves good again. Go on the forums, discuss things here, whatever it is, talk about it. Get some attention back to the Restoration Staff, because we could be so much better than these passives. We could be amazing, like the old Cycle of Life. Not that amazing, because that was busted, but we could do something better. Anyways, thanks again for watching, but I will see you guys next time.